when a talk show host tried to shame Carrie Underwood on live TV. She turned the tables with one line that stunned the globe. The air in the studio was electrifying, the type of energy that makes you lean closer to the edge of your seat. Carrie Underwood had committed to come on live tonight. With Melanie Hayes, a discussion program recognized for its bold political undertones and no-holds-barred attitude to interviews. The stage was set. The lights were hot. As the audience buzzed with expectation, Carrie was no stranger to the spotlight. With her Grammy Victories sold-out tours and decades-long careers, he'd faced harsh questions before, although this wasn't a regular commercial sit-down. Melanie Hayes, the host, was famed for her harsh tongue, his aptitude for producing viral gotcha moments. Her interviews typically walked a tight line between entertainment and provocation. And tonight, Carrie was her goal. From the time Carrie walked on stage, there was an unmistakable tension in the room. Woman radiated confidence. In a beautiful navy pantsuit, their blonde hair framing a serene yet resolute expression. The audience cheered, while Melanie's smile hinted at something more deliberate. She had a plan, and Carrie was about to step right into it. The interview began harmlessly. Enough. Melanie asked about Carrie's new album, her travel schedule, and life as a working mom. Carrie reacted with her usual warmth, her voice firm and honest, yet, as the questions went toward bigger subjects, her faith, her opinions on some social problems, became evident that Melanie wasn't interested in keeping on safe footing. "I've had to ask," Melanie said, leaning forward in her chair. "You've been quite loud about your personal values, especially when it comes to some political subjects. Do you think it's responsible for someone in your position to share such polarizing opinions?" It was a loaded question, enveloped in a tone that suggested judgment more than curiosity. The audience muttered, detecting the shift in the room. Carrie didn't flinch, because you could see the gears whirling behind her composed exterior. Although this was merely the opening move, and everyone in the room could feel that Melanie was only getting started. Carrie met Melanie's sharp inquiry with a measured smile, taking a moment to let the weight of the words settle. "I believe everyone has the right to their own views," she stated, her voice calm, but firm as an artist. "My job is to share my truth, not to dictate what others should believe." The response got a smattering of applause from the audience. But Melanie wasn't about to let it end there. She leaned back in her chair, her smile sharp and inflexible. "Decent enough," she answered, her tone carrying just enough sharpness to suggest otherwise. "But don't you think that as a public figure, your truth could have unforeseen effects, maybe even alienate some of your fans?" Carrie tilted her head slightly, a gesture that wasn't dismissive, but undoubtedly confident. "I assume my fans know who I am. They've backed me for years, because they appreciate my honesty. I trust them to make their own judgments, exactly as I've made mine." Melanie's eyes narrowed, her eyes almost feral. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the chance to go beyond casual debate and corner her visitors. She adjusted her position, leaning forward with false concern. "But what about when your truth doesn't connect with progress? I mean, don't you worry that sticking to your particular convictions could make you seem well out of contact?" The audience gasped faintly, sensing the intensity ratcheting up. Carrie's expression didn't waver, although there was a subtle alteration in her posture, a modest straightening of her spine, a hint that she was ready to push back. The cameras caught every detail. Melanie's smirk, the audience's keen anticipation, and Carrie's composed determination. "Out of touch," Carrie repeated as if testing the phrase. "I'm not sure. I understand what you mean. Could you clarify?" It was a brilliant move by asking for clarification. Carrie softly shifted the dynamic. Melanie, currently on the spot, hesitated for a fraction of a second, although she recovered fast, concealing the pause with an exaggerated shrug. "Och, let's just say that not everyone agrees with the stances you've taken on some problems. Some would even call them antiquated." The room fell silent. Even the audience appeared confused about how to react. It was the kind of tension that made everyone feel like they were part of the moment. unsure about what would happen next, but unable to look away. But as the host prepared to press her advantage, Carrie's reaction was already shaping, and it would shift the tone of the entire interview. Carrie took a big breath, her hands resting gently on her lap. The stillness that followed Melanie's punch felt almost tangible. As if the air in the studio had thickened, all eyes were on her, waited to see how she would answer. With a small bend of her head and a measured tone, Carrie began. Outdated, she repeated, her voice tinged with wonder, rather than defensiveness. It's interesting that you use that word to me. Holding on to principles, like kindness, integrity, and faith, isn't about being outdated. It's about keeping grounded. The audience burst into applause. A wave of support statements seemed to catch even Melanie off guard. Yet Carrie wasn't done. She leaned forward slightly, her serene manner now bearing a subtle intensity. You know, Melanie, it's easy to sit here and classify someone's opinions as outmoded when they don't fit into a precise narrative. But aren't we all here to celebrate variety? Not just in how we look, but in how we think. Melanie blinked momentarily, astonished by the grace and accuracy of Carrie's comments. The host opened her mouth to respond, but Carrie continued, her voice growing steadier with each word. We live in a world where everyone is quick to shout over each other, to assume the worst instead of striving to comprehend. I think we've forgotten how to have actual talk zones where we don't have to agree on everything, but may still respect one another. The studio was silent again, although this time it wasn't out of discomfort. It was the kind of silence that follows a profound truth, the kind that demands reflection. Even Melanie appeared temporarily at a loss for words, her carefully constructed composure faltering just so slightly. Carrie, sensing the shift, leaned back with a tiny smile. Look, I don't expect everyone to see the world the way I do. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell my story, my music, and yeah. Carrie reacted with her usual warmth, her voice firm and honesty, yet as the questions went toward bigger subjects, her faith, her opinions on some social problems, it became evident that Melanie wasn't interested in keeping on safe footing. I've had to ask, Melanie said, leaning forward in her chair. You've been quite loud about your personal values, especially when it comes to some political subjects. Do you think it's responsible for someone in your position to share such polarizing opinions? It was a loaded question, enveloped in a tone that suggested judgment more than curiosity. The audience muttered, detecting the shift in the room. Carrie didn't flinch, because you could see the gears whirling behind her composed exterior. Although this was merely the opening move, and everyone in the room could feel that Melanie was only getting started. Carrie met Melanie's sharp inquiry with a measured smile, taking a moment to let the weight of the words settle. I believe everyone has the right to their own views, she stated, her voice calm but firm as an artist. My job is to share my truth, not to dictate what others should believe. The response got a smattering of applause from the audience, but Melanie wasn't about to let it end there. She leaned back in her chair, her smile sharp and inflexible. Decent enough, she answered, her tone carrying just enough sharpness to suggest otherwise. But don't you think that as a public figure, your truth could have unforeseen effects, maybe even alienate some of your fans? Carrie tilted her head slightly, a gesture that wasn't dismissive, but undoubtedly confident. I assume my fans know who I am. They've backed me for years because they appreciate my honesty. I trust them to make their own judgments, exactly as I've made mine. Melanie's eyes narrowed, her eyes almost feral. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the chance to go beyond casual debate and corner her visitors. He adjusted her position, leaning forward with false concern. But my values, if that resonates with people, then excellent. If not, that's okay too. But one thing I'll never do is apologize for being who I am. The audience exploded into deafening applause, some even standing to demonstrate their support. Melanie, definitely rattled, but trying to regain control, forced a smile. Well, "You certainly know how to make your point," she said, her voice bearing a tinge of fake humor. Carrie smiled sweetly, but her eyes remained steadfast, unwavering. "I think it's necessary to stand firm when you believe in anything," she replied simply. Yet the full weight of Carrie's comments wasn't simply in how they hushed Melanie. It was in how they resonated, way outside the studio walls. After the applause subsided, the energy in the room had switched utterly. The formerly dominating Melanie Haisno seemed more wary, her typical sharpness blunted by Carrie's calm responses. It was evident she hadn't anticipated such grace under pressure, and it left her rushing to turn. Melanie updated her cue cards, visibly flustered, and attempted to steer the conversation back into safer territory. "Well, Carrie," she said with a strained smile, "your passion is undeniable, and I'm sure your fans love that about you." Carrie nodded politely. "I think passion is something we could all use a bit more of, don't you think?" The subtle jab wasn't missed on the audience. Laughter reverberated through the room, followed by another wave of applause. Melanie chuckled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes, and moved on to wrap up the part, although the harm was already done. Carrie had taken the moment. Melanie had crafted to corner her, and fashioned it into a magnificent display of honesty and authenticity. Backstage producers were already buzzing. Word of Carrie's clapback had spread. Across the factory floor, clips of her replies were being tagged as viral material, and social media coordinators were preparing to upload the occasion online before the show even finished broadcasting. Meanwhile, in the audience, a middle-aged man leaned over to his wife and whispered, "That was something else." She truly stood her stand. His wife nodded, her face one of admiration. "That's what we need more of," she said. "Those who don't back down when it matters." Carrie's team waiting in the green room exchanged glances of approval. They understood. This wasn't simply another interview. It was a defining moment. One of her assistants turned to another and stated, "This is going to explode online. Simply wait." And they were right. Once the section closed and the titles rolled, spectators at home were already grabbing their phones by the time Carrie got off the stage. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram were filled with clips of her statements. Hashtags like #Carrie Underwood Clapback and #Authenticity Matters trended within minutes. The reactions were overwhelmingly positive. People complimented Carrie's poise and grace, whereas some who hadn't previously been fans expressed increased admiration for her. Even some of Melanie's frequent viewers joined in calling out the host for her abusive methods. Carrie just schooled. Her one remark read, followed by a gif of applause. But it wasn't just social media taking note. By the next morning, major news outlets had picked up the story. Headlines ranged from, "Carrie Underwood stands her ground in heated interview, U.S. country star delivers viral clapback." The event had become more than just a viral clip. It was a cultural discourse about respect, sincerity, and remaining solid in your ideas. But as the world dissected the interview, Carrie pondered on the situation with her customary quiet resolve, knowing this was about more than just a viral sensation. Carrie Underwood woke up the next morning to discover her phone vibrating with notifications. Friends, family, fans, even those she hadn't spoken to in years, were sending her letters of sympathy. Headlines when viral video inundated her social media feed, each one applauding her poise and dignity. Although Carrie wasn't searching for validation, for her the actual effect lay in the messages from regular people who recognized a little of themselves in her own. Message in particular stood out. It came from a young woman named Anna in Montana. "I watched your interview last night." The message read, "I've always struggled to speak out for myself, but seeing you take your ground motivated me. Thank you for reminding me that it's all right to have a voice." Carrie smiled deeply, moved, for her moments like this were what made the spotlight worthy. It wasn't about the celebrity or the headlines. It was about interacting with people and making an impact, however little, whilst the broader conversation was taking on a life of its own. On morning talk shows, Commentators discuss the ethics of Melanie's approach, with many calling her out for breaching the line. There's a difference between harsh journalism and outright ambush, one analyst noted on a national morning show. What Carrie did wasn't just a clapback, it was a masterclass in grace under fire. Yet, it wasn't only the media. Weighing in, regular folks were sharing their own stories of feeling judged or undervalued, drawing parallels between Carrie's experiences. Social media become a venue for these talks, with hashtags like #Grace, Under Fire, and #Respect Each Other trending for days. Even Melanie Hayes wasn't immune to the reaction. Footage of her visibly stunned expression were circulated extensively, typically accompanied by captions like, "When your strategy backfires." Her regular viewers began doubting her approaches, and others even urged for her to give a formal apology. Carrie, however, stayed above the fray when a reporter caught up with her outside a Nashville recording studio and asked for her thoughts on the iconic moments. She simply grinned and said, "I'm just grateful. Individuals are discussing about the significance of compassion and respect. That's what really matters." Her humility only added to the public's admiration. Articles surfaced, praising her as a role model. Her followers rushed to defend her against detractors. It became evident that this moment wasn't just about one interview. It was about the values individuals desired to see mirrored in public figures. So while the world debated and discussed, Carrie focused on her next step, resolved to harness the momentum for something significanta. Week after the interview, Carrie Underwood finding herself back at her Nashville home, enjoying tea on her back porch as the sun dropped below the horizon. The tumult of the preceding few days had finally started to settle. But the significance of that moment on Live Tonight, when Melanie Hayes still lingered, Carrie had watched, when the debate stretched well beyond herself, from classroom debates to corporate dialogues. People were discussing about respect, authenticity, and the fortitude it takes to stand firm in a world that often urges us to conform. She couldn't have planned it, yet she welcomed the change. Her manager had suggested capitalizing on the buzz, doing a follow-up interview with a warmer host, perhaps even a short documentary on the importance of speaking out. But Carrie wasn't interested in milking the situation. Instead, she wanted to pursue something that connected with her ideals. A few days later, Carrie announced she would be contributing a percentage of her upcoming tours, proceeds to nonprofits focused on facilitating respectful dialogue and encouraging young people to share their beliefs without fear. Her announcement was welcomed with great support, further establishing her image as someone who didn't only talk about honesty, but lived it. When she reflected on the flurry of events, Carrie felt a tremendous feeling of tranquility. Sometimes, she thought aloud, we're thrown in awkward situations, remind us of who we are and what we stand for. Her words rang in her mind as she wrote a final statement on her Instagram account. It was a simple note to her fans, coupled with a candid shot from her last performance. "Thank you all for your warmth and support. Recall, sticking up for yourself doesn't imply tearing someone else down. It involves showing the world who you are and letting that speak for itself. Stay true to you." The message instantly went viral, with thousands of fans sharing it alongside their own story of getting the guts to speak up for themselves. Carrie's moment has evolved into a movement, one anchored in the belief that everyone deserves to be heard and respected. And as Carrie headed onto the stage for her next show, the noise of the audience reminded her that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that speaks with grace and conviction. The lesson was plain: staying solid in your convictions isn't just about winning an argument. It's about empowering others to find their voice, too. If this tale moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See more inspiring tales that praise courage, authenticity, and the human spirit. Let us know in the comments, when was a moment you stood your ground, and what did you learn from it?